I call this budget workshop of the Magnolia Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this workshop has been duly called, and that notice of this workshop has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. So, Ms. Hinkleman, do we have anybody signed up to speak?
No, sir.
All righty. Okay, I think you're on deck, Dr. Morris.
Thank you, sir. Forgive me, I'm going to take a seat. I'm nursing a bum foot, so I'm not trying to be lazy. All righty. So, first off, updates since our last budget workshop. The legislature still has not called a special session. We're still hearing that that is likely to happen in either mid to late September or October. But again, there's been nothing officially called at this time. So keeping that in mind, we're still under current law for funding purposes. We did receive our certified property values. Those values were calculated based on two different homestead exemption rates, the existing 40K, and then with the most recent property tax bill, the homestead exemption is anticipated to go up to $100,000 per household. That does require voter approval in November, but we certainly will assume that that happens. So a little bit of a mess from a timing perspective. The tax notices, according to the tax office, will go out in October, and we'll assume voter approval of the 100K with some special language on the tax bills just in case. So all of our tax revenue projections and such are based on the new 100,000 homestead exemption. Okay, and I'll go over just a second in terms of what that actually means numbers wise. The end result is no additional money. Basically, the state is holding us harmless for what we're losing with the increase in the homestead exemption, but it produces the same amount of overall revenue for us. Okay. Our concern, of course, is the ability for the state to maintain this post this legislative session, because they are kicking in a world of money to hold districts harmless, around $15 billion. So again, I think the most important thing to note at this point is that we're moving forward under current law, and the only increase in revenue is associated with additional students. So what does our property values look like? This is important, obviously, more for INS purposes, for payment of our debt. We went from $10.7 billion to $11.2. That number would have been about $12.2 had they not increased the homestead exemption. Okay, but still good growth. Proposed property tax rates. In tonight's meeting, we will ask the board to approve the proposed rates to go into the newspaper. But right now, we are anticipating a decrease of about 18 pennies on the total tax rate, where we maintain the INS rate, and the M&O rate goes down based on state law, which under old law, compressed at about 6 pennies, and then with the new bill associated with property tax relief, it decreased the M&O for all districts by an additional 10.7 cents. And so you can see here, we will be proposing a rate under $1. I would really have to go back to the archives to find a time where we were under $1 for tax rate purposes, because keep in mind, and prior to 05, 06, the M&O itself, we were at $1.50. And so I think this is good news. Looking around at and talking with some of the other districts, we've talked before, especially during our bond campaign, about where we sat in compared to other districts for total tax purposes. This is this year, because we don't know exactly where some of those are going to land, but you can see us in the maroon on the far right, and I do know where the other Montgomery County ISDs are going to land, and we will be basically exactly the same as Conroe. They are proposing a rate just over 96 cents as well. So that should position us well in terms of being right at the lowest in Montgomery County and one of the lowest in the areas. Yes, ma'am.
Can I have you go back to that last slide?
Sure.
So if I look at this, and I think last year we talked about how we were probably, in 20 years, it was the lowest tax rate we had had. And you said you'd probably have to go to the archives to figure out how long it's been since we've been this low for a tax
Under
rate.
$1, yes, ma'am. It's pretty remarkable.
crazy.
It's pretty remarkable. Yes, ma'am. We've had a steady decrease, you know. Some of that's generated, you know, by the state funding system, forcing us
Yeah.
to decrease the M&O, but we've also given back on the INS when we could afford to do so as well. So, yes, ma'am.
And then we had a bond in 2015.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just looking at your chart. So again, we've got empirical evidence that you can have a lower tax rate and pass a bond.
Absolutely. You know, we came through with our promises for 2015 and 2022.
And then we just passed a recent bond.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm seeing the tax rate is lower again.
Absolutely.
So again, empirical evidence, you can pass a bond and have a lower tax rate
Absolutely.
if you do it right.
Yes, ma'am. With proper planning.
With-
Yes, ma'am. So that is a fact.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so this is the proposed notice that will go out into the paper tomorrow if we approve it tonight. But just wanted to point out a couple of things on the notice. If you'll look towards the bottom of the page, total market value last year of the average residence was $357,000. This year it's $395,000. Total taxable last year was $317,000, and because of the increase in the homestead exemption and because of the decrease in the tax rate, the average taxpayer will be paying about $800 less per year in property taxes, which is a wonderful thing. So again, we will be proposing a rate of just over 96 cents tonight. Any question on this? Okay. So going back, just as a reminder from the first budget workshop, I mean, really nothing has changed. You know, obviously we've had 4 days of school. The enrollment is positive. It's on a positive trend. But there's still no school finance bill. You know, we talked about adopting a budget that did not include any pay raises based on the limited funds. However, we did hear from the board loud and clear that we want to do a one-time retention payment on October 15th of at least $500. And so we're hopeful that the funding will be even clearer by then. And should the legislature act, we are prepared to amend the budget and amend our compensation plan as well. Keep in mind, you know, that we focused on a few things last time: teacher pay, veteran teacher pay, and MISD teacher loyalty. As we said before, I think we have a good plan of how to sort of attack things to close some funding gaps, some pay gaps, if and when the funding becomes available.
Are we hearing when that special session might be yet?
You know, we've talked to Senator Kolkhorst's office, and they responded. This was a few weeks ago, so things could have changed. They responded that they anticipated it being in mid-September, but there was a statement by Lieutenant Governor the other day that said October. So there's nothing official that we've seen. But the tone was positive. I mean, the tone was very positive. Yeah, and I mean, they point blank said that the money is available. It's in the budget. We are going to call a special session to address school finance bill and to address teacher pay. That's what we've heard. But we're not counting our money yet. Okay, so here's what the numbers look like. First look at the numbers. At this point, I do not have the retention bonus built into the budget because we're anticipating potentially having to use a portion of reserves to do so, and I'm going to wait until we know what the amount is. But so you'll look at this page, you'll notice our three primary funds are all balanced. The total budget for the three primary funds is right at $175 million, which is quite large. And then you can see the proposed tax rates at the bottom of the page. This will be posted on the district's webpage in accordance with Truth in Taxation as well. And then, really on deck, notice of proposed rates will go into the paper after approval tonight. We'll have our public hearing to discuss the tax rate and budget adoption on August 28th. The fiscal year begins September 1st, and then we will cross our fingers that the legislature will meet soon. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of my presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. I mean, really, there's not much changed, fortunately and unfortunately, since the last meeting. But we are moving forward with a balanced budget and prepared to amend when funding becomes available. We've squeezed quarters out of dimes this year. I mean, we're at the end of the fourth year, beginning the year 5 of having the same funding per pupil that we had in 2019. And of course, since that time, inflation has gone up approximately 16%. So we have no new money to address inflation. And so, you know, I mean, and everyone's dealing with some of that to an extent. I will say this, you know, and everyone has similar headaches because of that. But if you've read any headlines across the state, there's a lot of districts that are struggling to find money to adhere to some of the new safety and security requirements. And now districts are required to have a SRO at every campus. And luckily, you know, by the good graces of our board, we've already done that. But they've only increased funding $15,000 per campus to address that. And so if you read headlines, there's districts around San Antonio that are looking for 50 to 60 SROs right now and have no new money to address it. So, you know, there's different challenges everywhere, but the inflation piece is certainly consistent. Yes, sir. And kudos to our board for making that decision years ago based on safety. So, any other questions? All right. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. That's the other piece as we talk about planning. You know, if and when money becomes available, we need to be very strategic with escrowing a portion of it to be prepared for staffing Autobahn and the operational cost associated with that.